بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا مولانا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك وعلمنا من لدنك علما ينفعنا في الدين والدنيا يا كريم. أما بعد. All praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and may peace and blessings be upon our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Inshallah, we'll start today with taking everyone's names, inshallah ta'ala. As usual, the durus start with, inshallah, huge amounts, and then as time goes, the amount tends to decrease. So whoever continues coming are who we want to, inshallah, invest in. Because inshallah ta'ala, dedication is not easy, especially in a country like this, in times like this, in a place like this. But dedication in ilm and in fiqh, and even having a dars you go to every week, is what shapes you, inshallah ta'ala. So here we have, of course, inshallah, I memorize all your names. So, of course, we have Hadi Mahdi, Brother Karam, Brother Shakil, and Ali, and we have Nada and Rahania. Inshallah. So that's who we have here. And on Zoom we have, how many people? I can't see the names. 14 people. Can we take a screenshot of the names? Inshallah. So we have 14 brothers and sisters on Zoom, inshallah. I'll take the names after the class, inshallah ta'ala. And inshallah, after this class, we will continue to add or decrease depending on the amount of people. And I remind everyone, of course, online to try and come as much as possible, inshallah. It's not easy for us to all make this time to come from far, myself and everyone else, but gathering together in ilm and taking ilm face to face is a lot more beneficial than online. Face-to-face ilm is the original way of seeking knowledge. It's the way of the Salaf, and it also has more barakah in it. As we know, we mentioned in the first dars that gathering together on ilm and meeting people on ilm is one of the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down His mercy, inshallah. So, inshallah, today we start the longest chapter of fiqh, inshallah ta'ala, which is Kitab al-Salah, the book of Salah. So, our scholars usually say at the beginning of this book, this part of fiqh, that Salah is the best physical act of worship that could be done towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's no physical act of worship more honorable than Salah. And that's why we find in the hadith that Salah is Amud al-Islam. It's the pillar of Islam. It's the identity of a Muslim. Every non-Muslim, when I say a Muslim, the only thing they know is that the Muslims pray 5 times a day. They can see them in the streets, in the masajid. Muslims pray 5 times a day. It's a very well-known thing about Muslims. And not everyone sees us fast in Ramadan because it's once a year. And also, fasting is not something you can witness. Zakat, it's done in a second. It doesn't take long to do. Hajj, we do it away from people. We do it in a different area. So Salah is the only physical act that is seen to everyone, and it's done in different times of the day, no matter if you're busy or not. So it's there, visual to everyone. And because of that, it's so important in Islam. Now, after Salah, fasting is second. So fasting in Ramadan is second. Fasting is the second most important act after Salah, and then Hajj, and then Zakat, when it comes to the 5 pillars of Islam. Although the scholars mention that there's some acts that are not these pillars, they're not visual acts that are even better than the physical acts that we do. A very famous saying of Imam Shafi'i is Al-ilmu khayrun min salati nafila. Al-ilmu khayrun min salati nafila. That knowledge, seeking knowledge, is better than non-obligatory salah, non-compulsory salah. And the reason is that studying knowledge benefits yourself and benefits others. It benefits people around you and generations to come. That's what carries Islam. Salah benefits you only. So that's why knowledge is more important than Salah. And some of our scholars say it's even more important than the the Rawatib, the Sunnah that come before and after Salah. Knowledge is even more important. So if someone had to seek knowledge or had the choice to sit up all night and pray, seeking knowledge would originally be better, unless the significant prayer at that moment has a special meaning in it. Non-physical actions are better than physical ones, of course. So, reflecting, sabr, okay, patience, rida, not riya, rida, it says riya on the picture. Rida, so being content. These are actions of the heart. Yeah? These are all more important than physical actions. So if someone reflects and has sabr, people harm him all the time, but he has sabr, he deals with it, his reward is higher than someone who's sitting there and praying. At the same time, this person who prays doesn't have sabr. He's not patient. He's not happy with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him. This person isn't as close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a person who has sabr. But other than these things, salah is number one. Other than these things, salah is number one. What is the definition of salah? What is salah? Salah is, okay, a number of actions and sayings. So it's made up from actions and sayings, two things. Everything in salah is either action or a saying. Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, actions and sayings. That begin with takbir, with Allahu Akbar, and end with taslim, Assalamu alaikum. They begin with taslim and they begin with takbir and end with taslim. Now, in our madhab, no other prayer than these 5 daily prayers are compulsory. Unless someone makes an oath to pray something else. If someone makes an oath to pray, then that becomes compulsory upon them. But other than these 5 daily prayers, it's not compulsory to pray. Also, funeral prayer is compulsory for the general public to pray on a dead Muslim, but it's not compulsory for every single individual. The only compulsory prayer for you to do is the 5 daily prayers. Even witr in our madhab is not compulsory. The Hanafi madhab, of course, believes it's compulsory in our madhab. It's extremely important, but it's not compulsory. Okay, inshallah, we start our reading, inshallah ta'ala. He says, Bismillah ar-Rahim, Kitab al-Salah, الصلاة المفروضة 5. الظهر وأول وقتها زوال الشمس وآخره إذا صار ظل كل شيء مثله بعد ظل الزوال والعصر وأول وقتها الزيادة على ظل المثل وآخره في الاختيار إلى ظل المثلين وفي الجواز إلى غروب الشمس والمغرب وقتها واحد وهو غروب الشمس ومقدار ما يؤذن ويتوضأ ويستر العورة ويقيم الصلاة ويصلي 5 ركعات والعشاء وأول وقتها إذا غاب الشفق الأحمر وآخره في الاختيار إلى ثلث الليل وفي الجواز إلى طلوع الفجر الثاني والصبح وأول وقتها طلوع الفجر الثاني وآخره في الاختيار إلى الإسفار وفي الجواز إلى طلوع الشمس.
There are 5 obligatory daily prayers. The time for the noon prayer begins with the sun passing its zenith. It ends when the length of an object's shadow minus its shadow at the zenith is the same as its height. The time for the mid-afternoon prayer begins when the length of an object's shadow minus its shadow at the zenith is greater than the object's height. Its preferred time ends when an object's shadow is twice its height. Its permissible time extends until sunset. The time for the sunset prayer is a single time. It begins when the sun sets completely and lasts long enough for one to perform the call to prayer, adhan, make ablution, cover what must be covered for prayer, perform the call to commence the prayer, iqama, and pray 5 rakat prayer cycles. The time for the night prayer begins when the red in the sky disappears. Its preferred time extends until the end of the first third of the night. Its permissible time extends until the beginning of true dawn. The time for the dawn prayer begins at true dawn. Its preferred time extends until a yellow glow appears on the horizon, and its permissible time extends to the rising of the sun.
Okay, let's take the times of salawat, which is the most important thing. And it's important for every Muslim to understand the times of salah, because if you were in a situation where you didn't have the phone with you or something, you need to know generally what the times of salah look like. So I'll try to make it as simple as possible, inshallah. Number 1, dhuhr. The scholars start with dhuhr because dhuhr is the first prayer that Jibreel prayed with the Prophet ﷺ once he came back from Isra and Mi'raj. So we start with dhuhr, not with fajr. So dhuhr is 4 rak'at, of course, it's clear. And it starts after zenith. So when the sun is at its peak, in the middle of the sky, okay, if you wait for a few seconds, it will start to have shadow. Once that shadow starts, that is when Dhuhr starts. So once there's a bit of shadow that begins, Zenith itself is not time of Dhuhr, but just after the Zenith, once a small little shadow occurs, Dhuhr time starts. And it continues until the shadow of an object. So if you have an object that's standing, okay, the shadow of the object comes as long as the object itself. So if this was 1 meter, the length would be 1 meter plus that small little shadow of zenith. So just over a meter. That is the end of Dhuhr time. And then of course Asr time will enter after that. It's best to pray Dhuhr as soon as the adhan goes, after making wudu and doing whatever sunnah prayers and sunnah actions you need to do before salah. So all the actions just before salah, with the salah itself, make up the chosen time, the best time of salah. Rasulullah said in a hadith Ibn Mas'ud in Sahih Muslim, and it has a notice in Sahih Bukhari as well, that the best action is salah on its time. The most beloved action to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the best action. So the scholars in our madhab say this is the chosen time of Dhuhr. The permissible time is more than that. So the permissible time starts from the beginning of time and it continues until the end of Dhuhr, just before the end of Dhuhr, when there's just enough time to pray 4 rak'at. So that could be maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes before Asr time, up to 5 minutes. So from the start of Dhuhr until 5 minutes before Asr, that's permissible. It's fine, and you can delay Salah to the end, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's haram to delay Salah until there's not enough time to pray even 4 rak'at. If you delay Salah until there's only enough time to pray 2 rak'at, you are sinful, but your Salah is correct, and it counts that it's in time as long as you pray 1 rak'at in time. If you pray 1 rak'at in time, you're considered to have not delayed your Salah, as long as you pray 1 rak'ah. But it's haram to wait until there's not enough time to pray all 4 rak'at in the time of Dhuhr. That's the times of Dhuhr in detail. Okay. What about Asr? So Asr is 4 rak'at, and it begins from the end of Dhuhr until sunset. So when the whole entire sun disappears, there's no more sunlight in the horizon, then Maghrib has entered and Asr has finished. It's best to pray Asr at the beginning, the same thing. So as soon as the adhan goes, you make wudu and you do the sunnah that is needed to be done before Asr. You hear the adhan, you get ready for salah, and then you pray straight away. It's permissible, that's the chosen time. It's after that, it's permissible to pray Asr from the beginning of time until the length of an item is double its length. So if this is 1 meter, the shadow will be 2 meters long, or just over 2 meters long. Once it reaches that time, so it's double the length, then the chosen time has ended. The chosen time has entered. It's permissible to pray after the chosen time. It's not makruh, but it's not as good. It's better to pray it earlier than that. But until the horizon starts to become yellow. Okay, the horizon starts to become yellow, which is the end of Asr time in the Hanafi madhab. Until then, it's permissible. After that, it becomes makruh, disliked to delay until then. After that, it becomes makruh. Okay. But as long as you pray, you leave enough time to pray all 4 rak'ah in the time of Asr, your Asr is correct and there's no sin on you. But just like we said in Dhuhr time. So the difference between Asr and Dhuhr is that there's a dislike time, there's a makruh time in Asr. For Dhuhr, there's no makruh time in Dhuhr. Okay. After Asr. Now, in bigger books of fiqh, they go into so much detail, but I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, but mention every point, inshallah. Maghrib starts the moment Asr ends. Maghrib is 3 rak'at, and it enters at the time of Asr. In the book that we just read now, he said that Maghrib is the length of adhan and wudu and praying 5 rak'at, so 2 rak'at sunnah before Maghrib and then, or after Maghrib and Maghrib itself. What he mentioned is not the famous opinion. So what's mentioned in the book is not the famous opinion in the madhab. So what we're going to mention now is the famous opinion. This is what the fatwa of the Shafi'i scholars is built on, not what is mentioned in the book. So that's not mu'tamad, basically. Some scholars say it is mu'tamad, but it's not what the fatwa is given according to. And there's a story behind this. Okay. So our scholars say that Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, in his old school, in his old opinion before he went to Egypt, he used to believe that Maghrib was until Isha time. And then he changed his opinion while he was in Egypt. And he took the same opinion as Imam Malik, that Maghrib is only about 15 minutes. That time, okay? And then he went back to his old opinion before he passed away. So what is in the book is his second opinion, and what we're going to mention now is his third opinion. So we take the Imam Shafi'i's last opinion that he took, that he went back to before he passed away. And that is that Maghrib extends until Isha. It's not haram to delay Maghrib until Isha time. Okay? But it's better to pray as soon as time enters. Delaying Maghrib beyond the time you need for adhan, iqamah, cleaning yourself, getting dressed, and praying 7 rak'at. Not 5, 7. 2 sunnah before Maghrib and 2 after Maghrib is disliked. It's makruh, but it's not haram. Okay? Maghrib time ends when the red horizon disappears. In English, there's nothing called the red horizon. Okay? It's something that you need to observe. You need to observe. And it's usually an hour and something after Maghrib time. So there's a red color in the sky if you were to go outside of the city. In the city, it's impossible to see. Outside of the city, if you had no lights at all, not even near lights, there would be some type of red horizon in the sky. Once that disappears and it's all black, you can, or there's a bit of yellow and white, that's okay, but there's no red in the sky, you are able to pray Isha. The time of Maghrib enters and Isha, the time of Maghrib ends and Isha enters. Most calendars we have, or the al-Qura calendar, delays Isha even beyond that. So you can't pray Maghrib just before the adhan of al-Qura, which is 1.5 hours after Maghrib, next adhan. You have to pray before that, but I would advise not to delay Maghrib more than 50 minutes to an hour. Not more than 50 minutes to an hour, but don't pray Isha until you're sure Isha time has entered, just in case. Just in case. What about Isha? Isha is 4 rak'at. And it starts at the end of Maghrib time and it ends at Fajr time. It ends at Fajr time. So Isha has a very long time. It's best to pray Isha at the beginning of its time according to Imam Shafi'i. Most other schools of thought believe that it's better to delay Isha. In the Shafi'i madhab, it's better to pray Isha early. It's better to pray Isha early. It's permissible to pray Isha until the fake Fajr, which is the first Fajr. What's the first Fajr? If you were to look at the horizon before Fajr time, the sky will be pitch black and then there will be shooting light that comes out. Okay, light that basically shoots up. That light comes and then disappears a few moments later. That's the fake Fajr, not real Fajr. Fajr time has not entered, but it's just before Fajr time. So until then, it's permissible to pray Isha. After that, it's disliked, according to what some of our Imam mentioned, it's disliked to delay Fajr after that until the second Fajr, which is the spreaded light that you can see all across the horizon. That is the real Fajr, and that's when your fasting starts and when Fajr time enters and all of that. Okay. Fajr prayer starts with the true horizon. It's best to pray Fajr at the beginning of its time, and it's disliked to delay Fajr until the sky is red before sunset, before sunrise. It's disliked to delay it that much, but it's not haram as long as you pray Fajr in its time. So in the Shafi'i madhab, we can find that it's not haram to pray Salah at the end of its time. It's not haram. But it's better to pray at the start of its time, no matter if it's Dhuhr, Fajr, Asr, Maghrib, or Isha. Inshallah. Okay. Now, I've added another section to this dars that's not in the book, which is important. Okay? And it has something to do with the times of Salah. Once the time of Salah enters, it's haram for us to not pray. Okay? But there's certain excuses that you are allowed to have, and if these excuses apply to you, you don't have to pray. What are these excuses? Number one, if you're sleeping from before the time of Salah had entered. If you start sleeping before the time of Salah enters, then Salah is not compulsory upon you. Someone's sleeping, and they don't get up until Salah time finished. Are they sinful? They're not sinful. Okay, number two, forgetting. If someone generally forgot, they didn't mean to, but they actually forgot, and they missed Salah, it's not compulsory, but these two people have to pray later on. They have to make up the prayer later on. They don't have to make it up immediately, but it's better to. But they have to make it up before they pass away. Okay? Combining two salah with the conditions is also permissible. And if you combine a salah, then you can delay your dhuhr until asr time, for example. Maghrib until isha time. Being forced not to pray. How does that work? For example, if someone forces you not to pray, they force you to do something that breaks your prayer, for example. Let's say they put najasa on you, they make your awra exposed, they make you move too much, talk. Okay, they are forcing you to do things that break your prayer, and you can't even pray, even in any state possible. And in that state, you are allowed to delay your prayer. If you are traveling to Arafah to make Hajj, okay, you haven't done Hajj before and you're going to Arafah to do Hajj. As we know, if you miss Arafah, what happens? Your Hajj doesn't count no matter what. Khalas, you can't make it. You have to do Hajj again next year, okay? So if you're going to Arafah, for example, now what time does Arafah end? It ends at Fajr, the day of Eid. So if Fajr, the day of Eid time enters and you haven't gone to Arafah yet, your Hajj doesn't count. So you have to enter Arafah before Fajr, the day of Eid. So if there's only 10 minutes until Fajr, for example, okay, and someone's driving down the highway to Mecca from Taif, yeah, and they're going 200 km an hour, okay, and they want to enter Arafah just before Fajr time enters, okay, but they haven't prayed Isha yet. It's permissible to delay Isha, to leave Isha, just to make your Hajj, and then you can pray Isha later on after Fajr. It's okay. Saving someone from drowning or burning or anything similar is, of course, it's permissible to leave your salah if you need to do that. Defending your wealth or yourself, if someone's going to harm you, going to kill you, then you don't have to just pray even if there's going to be harm on you. Okay, if someone has passed away and you're worried that the body might explode. In the old days, we didn't have fridges and it was very hot. So if someone was to be left, the body might explode. Then they say, no, pray on them first, even if the time of Salah finishes and you haven't prayed Dhuhr or Asr yet, then it's permissible to delay your Salah. And of course, period and bleeding that we went over, it's permissible it's haram to pray in that state, and you need to delay your Salah, and you don't need to make it up. Okay. Any questions regarding Salah and the time of Salah in the group? Is there anything?
There's a question about sleeping. Is someone sinful if they sleep before Salah time enters but don't take any measures to wake up on time?
No, they're not sinful if they sleep before time enters and they don't take measures to get up, but it's very dangerous to do so. Some scholars believe it's sinful for Fajr, but the famous opinion is that it's not haram. There's no sin on you as long as you don't wake up for one moment in the time of Salah, because Salah doesn't become compulsory on you until the time enters. So the time has entered and you are not in your mind. So that is the ruling, but it's very dangerous. And if you deal with the rulings like that, is it haram or not haram, it's going to sleep before time, then the shaitan was probably going to use that as a door to get you to leaving Salah even when you're awake, to forgetting about Salah, to not caring about Salah. So what's halal and haram is something, and then the component of taqwa and tazkiyah and having that care of salah is another thing that you should always take into consideration if you want to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
There's a question about for saving someone. Does that include doctors needing to do an operation? Are they allowed to delay salah?
Yes, of course. If the person's going to die and has to pray, if you don't pray, then of course, yes. As long as the person that is being saved falls under the conditions of the person that you're allowed to save. There's conditions in bigger books of fiqh of the person who you're allowed to delay salah for. Not anyone, but certain people. So if someone, for example, is a person who has dedicated their life to attacking the religion, and the moment they get up from the operation, they're going to start attacking the religion. We're not saying kill them. We're not saying that, yeah? But we're saying you're not allowed to delay your salah for someone like that. But if the person is a genuine person, there's conditions of that person in fiqh that you're allowed to delay for, then you can, even if it's an operation, of course.
Does that include Muslims and non-Muslims in the context of a hospital?
It's better to leave it to detailed book of fiqh, inshallah. But these are just the general rulings, inshallah.
Yeah, I'll read out the last question.
Yeah.
If someone's made aware of the time of prayer, but then later forgets about it afterwards, are they sinful for not praying when immediately informed?
If?
So someone's made aware of the time of prayer, but then they forget later.
If you were made aware of the time of prayer, and you didn't think you're going to forget, so most likely you're going to remember, okay? So you didn't pray immediately. You said, yeah, I know I'm going to pray in 5 minutes. And then you forgot without being neglectful of salah, then there's no sin on you. As long as you don't know that you're going to forget, it's not something that you thought would happen, then you're not sinful, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, what are the conditions of prayer being compulsory upon someone? When does prayer become compulsory upon someone? The author says, فصل وشرائط وجوب الصلاة ثلاثة أشياء الإسلام والبلوغ والعقل وهو حد التكليف.
3 conditions obligate prayer. One must pray if one is a Muslim, mature, and of sound mind. The combination of these 3 conditions is the definition of legal responsibility, taklif.
Okay, so in Safinat al-Najah, there was a whole dars about taklif, when someone becomes accountable in Islam, and the shurut, the conditions of bulugh, when someone becomes baligh, when someone reaches the age of puberty. So he mentioned 3 main conditions, but in detail they are 5 or 6 in detail. So the detailed conditions are like this. Number 1, Islam. If someone hasn't accepted Islam yet, okay, and then they accept Islam at the age of 30, do they have to repeat all the salawat they did before they accepted Islam? No. Why? Because it was not compulsory upon them, meaning they didn't have to repeat it. But it doesn't mean that salah is not originally compulsory upon non-Muslims. It's compulsory upon them. They are ordered to pray, but they're ordered to take shahada first and then pray. Okay? And if they become Muslim, they don't have to repeat the prayers that they didn't do. So the prayers that you need to fulfill, to do, are the prayers that you meet after becoming Muslim. Okay? Unless someone leaves Islam, someone apostates, and then comes back to Islam, they have to repeat the salawat they left in that period. Why? Because they originally had entered Islam already. So there's a difference. But if someone had never entered Islam before, and then they enter Islam, they don't have to repeat the salat that they left. Puberty is the second condition. If someone is young, someone hasn't reached the age of 9, or they've reached the age of 9 lunar years, but none of the signs happened, then they don't need to pray until they have a sign or they reach the age of 15. What are the signs of puberty in Islam? Does anyone remember from Sunnah Najah? It's pretty simple in Shafi'i madhab. Yeah, it's menses, so hayd. Yes, wet dream. Age of 15. Yep. These are the main signs. Hair and all those things are not signs of puberty in the Shafi'i madhab. If they happen, it doesn't mean the person has reached the age of puberty. Okay. Being sane. If someone is not in their mind, they don't have to pray. That's clear. Yeah? Not bleeding. So hayd and nifas, postnatal bleeding or menstruation are both reasons to not pray. In that state, they don't have to pray this prayer, and they don't have to repeat these prayers either. For the message of Islam to reach the person, if someone was born in the middle of nowhere and they didn't have any contact to scholars or Muslims, okay, and they didn't learn how to pray, they didn't know how to pray, no one taught them, they didn't have to repeat the salawat once they learn. Why? Because there was no one to teach them, and it's not compulsory until you are able to access the knowledge. Then it becomes compulsory on you. The last reason is that the senses of the person are available. So if someone cannot see nor hear, and they reached puberty while they couldn't see or hear, so they weren't able to learn, they don't have to pray, and if they pass away, they're not going to be asked why they didn't pray. They're not going to be questioned because of that. But if someone learns and knows how to pray and understands and then loses his senses, but he reached the age of puberty already and he understands what to do already, then, of course, if they can pray, they have to pray. But it's all about not being able to learn at that time.
You mentioned sight and hearing. Does it have to be both or one of?
So, if they're both not there
So if they're both,
before the age of... Okay, if someone can't see, for example, okay? Someone can't see.
if he just can't see,
Yeah.
is he still?
Can they know how to pray? Can they understand? It's about understanding. If you can understand, if you understand the aura of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you reach the age of puberty, you have to pray. If you can't understand, okay, and you haven't reached the age of puberty, you don't have to pray, and that's... Okay, after that he says, any questions about that? Okay. After that he says, الصلوات المسنونات خمس العيدان والكسوفان والاستسقاء والسنن التابعة للفرائض 17 ركعة ركعتا الفجر وأربع قبل الظهر وركعتان بعدها وأربع قبل العصر وركعتان بعد المغرب وثلاث بعد العشاء ويوتر بواحدة منهن وثلاث نوافل مؤكدات الصلاة الليل وصلاة الضحى وصلاة التراويح.
There are 5 recommended prayers. 1 to 2, the 2 Eid prayers. 3 to 4, the solar and lunar eclipse prayers. And number 5, the drought prayer. There are 17 prayer cycles of recommended prayers associated with the obligatory daily prayers, Rawatib. Number 1, 2 before the dawn prayer. Number 2, 4 before the noon prayer and 2 after its performance. 4 before the mid-afternoon prayer. 2 after the sunset prayer. 3 after the night prayer. 1 single prayer cycle, which is witr. 3 supererogatory nafila and nawafil prayers are emphasized. Number 1, the night vigil prayer, qiyam al-layl. Number 2, the mid-morning prayer, Duhaa. And number 3, tarawih.
Okay, so the author here, he summarized all the nawafil in one context. Some of them have different rulings and are more important than others. We're going to go into them in detail, inshallah ta'ala. First of all, sunnah and nafl prayer means the same thing in the Shafi'i madhab. Nafl in Arabic means extra. Has anyone memorized the word nafl in the Quran? Nafila, nafl. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهَبْنَا لَهُ إِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ نَافِلَةً. That we gave Ibrahim Ishaq and Ya'qub nafila. We gave him Ya'qub extra. He wanted 1 kid. Allah gave him Ishaq and Ya'qub as a grandson through Ishaq. And he met him, or he was aware of him before he passed away. So nafl means extra. Sunnah means something that is not compulsory. Nafl prayers do not make up fard prayers in this life. If you miss fard, there's a fatwa that goes around. And this is important for everyone to understand. There's a famous fatwa that some people make online. You hear a lot. It says, if you haven't prayed for a certain number of years in your life, just pray a lot of sunnah prayers. Pray a lot of sunnah, as much as you can. And that's it, makes it up. Yeah? That fatwa goes against all 4 madhab. Goes against all the 4 madhab of fiqh, and no madhab allows something like that. if you've missed prayer, you need to make it up. No matter if you missed it intentionally or by accident, you need to make up those prayers. Do they make them up in the akhirah? Some scholars say that 70 rak'ah of nafl in the akhirah makes the rewards of 1 rak'ah. But anyway, that's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best and we're not going to go into. But in the dunya, we're ordered to pray the fard prayers, and nafl don't make up fard prayers. Now, nafl prayers make up the shortcomings in fard prayers that don't break the prayer. For example, I'm praying and I think about something else. I'm distracted. I'm doing things I should be doing in prayer, but I didn't break my prayer. The nafl makes up these things, but it doesn't make up something that breaks the prayer. Okay. Nafl, sunnah, mustahab, tatawwu', mandub. These are all words of the same thing. They mean sunnah prayers. Okay. Now I'm going to mention nafl prayers in its order of importance. So the order I mentioned here is the order of the Shafi'i madhab when it comes to the importance. The most important nafl prayer is Eid. The most important nafl prayer is Eid prayer. Alhamdulillah, in Australia, most people pray Eid. Overseas, in some countries, the sisters don't pray Eid, for example. Yeah, praying Eid is very important. It's the most important nafl prayer out there. Why is it so important? Some other madhabs believe it's compulsory. Okay, so it's important to pray nafl, to pray Eid prayer, especially the large Eid, the Eid al-Adha. That's even more important than Eid al-Fitr. Okay, after that, Kusuf prayers, the eclipse prayer, the prayer of eclipse. When there's eclipse, it's sunnah to pray. And after that is rain prayer. Rain prayer is after that. These 3 prayers are prayers that you should do, or usually they are done in jama'ah, in congregation, and that gives them more importance. After these 3 prayers, you have witr. You have witr prayer. And witr, as we know, some other madhab say it's compulsory, like the Hanafi madhab. So if there's difference about something being compulsory, that becomes number 1. After witr, the sunnahs before and after your 5 daily prayers. These are known as Rawatib. After that is Tarawih. Tarawih, which is the prayer that you pray in Ramadan. After that is Duhaa. And then the sunnah of entering the masjid. When you enter the masjid, it's sunnah to pray. Whether you enter after Asr, after Fajr, anytime. In the Shafi'i madhab, it's sunnah to pray when you enter the masjid. Okay? And the sunnah of wudu, same thing. You make wudu, whether it's after Asr, after Fajr, in the time you're not supposed to pray, it's sunnah to pray. When you do that, and that's the order of sunnah prayers, and it's important. But all sunnahs are important, of course. Okay. Now, Eid prayer has a lot of details. I'm going to try to rush through it as fast as I can, inshallah. Now, both Eids are only 2 rak'ah. That's clear. When you make takbiratul ihram, you intend Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr. You have to specifically intend the type of Eid that you're praying, because they're different. Okay, the first rak'ah has 7 takbirs after the first takbir. After the first takbir. So you say takbiratul ihram, and you say the opening dua. And after the opening dua, before you say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, you make 7 takbirs. Now, these takbirs are not compulsory, but they are sunnah. If you don't do them, your salah is correct. It's good to say subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allah, wallahu akbar between them, but if you don't say anything between them, it's not haram. Okay. After that, you read Fatiha, and after reading Fatiha, the Imam recites another surah. If you are leading the prayer, you recite a surah. If you're not leading the prayer, you don't recite anything. If you're praying behind the Imam, you don't recite anything after Fatiha. The scholars say it's preferable to recite Surah Qaf. If not, Surah A'la or Surah Kafirun in the first rak'ah. The second rak'ah, we have 5 takbirs after the takbir of getting up. After that takbir of getting up. And it's best to recite Surah Qamar or Surah Insan or Surah Ikhlas in the second rak'ah. Khutbah after prayer is sunnah. And if someone does khutbah before prayer, it doesn't count. It has to be after Salatul Eid. The conditions of khutbah are the same conditions of Jumu'ah. Jumu'ah khutbah has conditions. Sending salat on Prophet ﷺ and all these things. The same conditions apply to the khutbah of Eid. The first khutbah should have 9 takbirs. and the second should have 7 takbirs. So the Imam says Allahu Akbar in the start of the khutbah 9 times, and he says takbir 7 times in the second khutbah. Eid prayer starts from sunrise. Not 15 minutes after sunrise, no. From sunrise itself. Okay? Even the time you're not supposed to pray is a time for Eid prayer. But it's better to delay it until the time of Duhaa, which is about 20 minutes after, 15-20 minutes after the sunrise. It starts from sunrise until Dhuhr time. Until Zahir. An Eid can be prayed alone and in congregation. So congregation is not a condition for Salatul Eid. If you miss Eid with the Imam, pray Eid at home before Dhuhr time. Before Dhuhr time. But don't leave the Salatul Eid. Okay. Eclipse prayer. Eclipse prayer can be done in 3 different ways. Number 1, just praying 2 normal rak'ah. Just praying 2 rak'ah normally. That's the minimum. Once the eclipse happens, you get up and you pray 2 rak'ah in 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever, and that's it. It's better to be done. The second way is to do it with 2 extra ruku'. So you pray, Fatiha, read your surah, then you go into ruku', then you get up, recite again, and then you go into ruku'. Okay, so you do 2 ruku' in the first rak'ah and 2 ruku' in the second rak'ah. The third way is to do 2 extra ruku', but also do it long. So recite in length, do ruku' in length, recite in length again. So do all these things in length. That's the sunnah. Okay? After doing your Kusuf prayer, 2 khutbahs should be done. So the Imam stands up and gives 2 khutbahs after the Kusuf prayer. Rain prayer has the same rulings as Eid prayer. Khutbahs can be done before it, but it's better to do it after rain prayer. And instead of takbir in the khutbah, the Imam makes istighfar. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Witr prayer. Witr is from 1 rak'ah until 11 rak'at. It can't be done more than 11. If someone intends to pray more than 11, their prayer is not correct. It can be from 1 to 11. If you pray witr, and the rulings of witr are very important. Most people don't know the rulings of witr, okay? If you pray witr more than 1 rak'ah, there's different ways that you can do it. You can make salam after every 2 rak'at. You can do that. Some scholars say even after every 3 rak'at. But let's just say, to make it simple, every 2 rak'ah you make salam. So you pray, and then after the second rak'ah, Assalamu alaikum, you get up and you pray again. And all of these prayers are with the intention of witr. Not qiyam al-layl, witr. With the intention of witr. Okay? And then the last rak'ah, of course, you don't pray 2, you pray witr. If you don't want to do salam after every 2 rak'ah, you can join the rak'at. How do you join them all? You can pray all 11, or all 9, or all 7, or all 5, or all 3, or all 1. You can pray them without any salam in the middle. If you decide to pray multiple rak'at without cutting them, there's 2 ways to do it, which is called joining the witr. Number 1, to only make 1 tashahhud at the end. So 1 tashahhud before your salam. That's simple. That's the simplest way to pray witr. No matter how much you pray, you make 1 tashahhud at the end. And number 2 is to make 2 tashahhuds. Once in the second last and once in the last rak'ah. But not after every 2 if you're going to pray multiple rak'ah joined. Not after every 2. Only in the last or the last and second last. But no more than that. Witr starts after Isha, even if Isha is joined with Fajr. Is joined with Maghrib. So if you pray Isha with Maghrib time, Witr time starts after that. And it continues until Fajr time. What are the Sunnah prayers before and after the 5 compulsory prayers? Number 1. The extremely important ones are 2 before Fajr, 2 before Dhuhr, 2 after Dhuhr, 2 after Maghrib, and 2 after Isha. These are known as Rawatib al-Mu'akkada, the emphasized Rawatib Sunnahs. And then the other ones that are also Sunnah, but not as important as these ones, are an extra 2 before Dhuhr, an extra 2 after Dhuhr, 4 before Asr, 2 before Maghrib, and 2 before Isha. Some of these the author didn't mention, so these are in detail, but this is what our scholars mention in the larger books of fiqh. Okay, Taraweeh. Taraweeh must be done after Isha. And it can only be done 2 rak'ah, 2 rak'ah, 2 rak'ah. You can't do 4, 4, 4, 4 in our madhab. Every 2 rak'ah has to have a salam. So if you're praying Taraweeh, pray it in sets of 2. You can't do more than 2. Why? Because it's specific salah. The rulings and the nusus, the ahadith that we got about Taraweeh, don't say that it was done joint. So we can't make up our own ruling and join them. Witr, there's many hadith that say witr was done in different forms, which the scholars understood that you can join. But in Taraweeh, just 2 by 2. Congregation in Taraweeh is sunnah, but you can also do it alone. If you can't go to the masjid, pray Taraweeh at home. And the number of rak'at at Taraweeh are 20. If you pray less than 20, does it count? It counts. If someone prays 11, it counts. If someone prays 8, it counts. If someone prays 6, it counts. But you've done part of Taraweeh, not the full Taraweeh. So the full ajr is for 20, but if someone does less, it counts. If someone does less, it counts, but it's not chosen. It's not the best thing. The best thing is to do is to pray 20. A lot of Muslims believe and understand that there's 2 choices, 2 opinions, 8 and 20. Yeah? If you want to pray 8, that's one opinion. If you want to pray 20, it's one opinion, and you have the choice. There's nothing like that in the form of that says there's 8 and 20. Yeah? 8 rak'at is not the opinion of any madhab. So if you don't want to pray all the 20, why should you stop at 8? Why not stop at 10 and get the extra reward of praying 2 more? Yeah? People think there's a significance in 8. And that is a mistake, and it comes from witr salah. They think it's like witr. That 8 plus 2 and then 1 at the end equals 11. 11 is the maximum for witr, not for Taraweeh. Taraweeh is a totally different salah with different intention when you start salah. So don't mix up witr and Taraweeh, yeah? Nothing to do with each other. Because of the fatwa of some of the later scholars that came at this day and age, who gave the fatwa that Taraweeh doesn't go past 8 rak'at, and then 2 of Shafi'i and 1 witr, this fatwa became very famous. But it is a modern fatwa that goes against the former madhab. It's one of the fatwa that we talked about in history of fiqh class, and it goes against the 4 madhab. So if anyone has a center of masjid, if you want to make an example, if you want to teach people, what you can do instead of putting a car park for 8 and car park for 20 is just say for people who are going to leave early, or for 10, or for whatever, but don't make it just 8, because we need to change the idea that 8 has some significance. It doesn't have any significance. 8 is not something special. It's permissible, but it doesn't have significance to it. Okay.
There's a question
Yes,
about...
questions.
Can you pray more nafl after witr? I have heard it is disliked.
Okay, so there's many opinions when it comes to praying after witr. The general answer, there's a lot of detail, too much detail for this class, but generally, if it's better to try to make your witr the last prayer you pray at night, yeah, to end your night with witr, especially because some scholars believe that if you pray after witr, you should pray witr again, and there's a lot of detail. But if you pray witr and then you want to pray extra, you have the need to pray extra, then it's not haram, it's fine, you're allowed to pray after witr, but you don't repeat witr. But you don't repeat witr salah, and we answered that in the group many times. So in our madhab, you don't repeat witr, and it's okay to pray after witr, but witr generally should be the last prayer at the night. Allahu a'lam. Okay. Any other questions we have before we?
Do you intend rakats for witr as well?
Do you intend what?
The rakats for the witr.
What do you mean intend?
Just before starting?
Okay, so if you start witr prayer, okay, if you just intend witr by itself, if you just intend witr alone, without anything else, then there's 2 opinions in the Shafi'i madhab. One says you can choose. pray 1 rak'ah or 3 rak'ah, okay, it's up to you. And then the second opinion is that you have to make it more than one. You have to make it more than one. If you want to pray one, you should intend. So if you want to just do one witr, while you're making the takbir, it's better to intend one witr, because that's the minimum. Okay? So if you make one, it's better to intend when you do one, even though some schools say you don't have to. There's a difference of opinion, but it's better to be safe to intend if you just want to pray one. If you just want to pray 1 rak'ah, but if you want to pray 3 or something, you don't need to intend. Okay, after that, the author says, فَصْلٌ وَشَرَائِطُ الصَّلَاةِ. Okay, I think we're out of time. I think we're out of time, inshallah. I don't want to... Should we take these or should we stop? We'll vote, inshallah. Take a vote. Ali, you're rushed though. Anyone in the group? Okay. We started about 10 minutes late, so we can go on for 5 minutes if we want. Okay. Inshallah, 5 minutes and then we'll stop, inshallah. He says after this, وَشَرَائِطُ الصَّلَاةِ قَبْلَ الدُّخُولِ فِيهَا 5 أشياء. طهارة الأعضاء من الحدث والنجس وستر العورة بلباس طاهر والوقوف على مكان طاهر والعلم بدخول الوقت واستقبال القبلة ويجوز ترك القبلة في حالتين في شدة الخوف وفي نافلة السفر على الراحلة.
There are 5 prerequisites for prayer. The absence of ritual impurity, hadith, and inexcusable filth, covering one's nakedness with clothes that are pure, praying on something that is pure, knowing that the prayer time has entered, and facing the direction of the Kaaba. In 2 situations, it is permissible to deviate from the direction of the prayer if there is intense fear and if praying non-obligatory prayer during the journey while riding along.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot of these conditions in Safinat al-Najah because the conditions of Salah is something that went into detail, and in the coming durus, we're going to come across these in many different occasions. That's why I'm not going to go into too much detail, but generally, there's no more slides. We're just going to talk about the most important things to keep in mind about this. Number 1. Before entering Salah, these are conditions that you have to have. طهارة الأعضاء من الحدث والنجس. In the book of Tahara, we study this in detail. You have to have Tahara from both impurity, physical impurity, and virtual impurity, from Hadath and from Najas. If you have Najasa on you, only certain types of Najasa that we mentioned are permissible to pray with. We mentioned them in detail. Yeah, like a little bit of blood, something like that. But generally, najasa should be removed from your body, your clothes, and the place you pray on. From hadath means you have to have wudu and ghusl to pray. If you're not on ghusl, if you're not on wudu, you can't pray. Unless you make tayammum, all those things that we mentioned in detail. Okay. After that, you need to cover your awrah. The awrah of salah. What's the awrah of salah? For a man, from his belly button to his knees. From a lady, everything other than her face and hands need to be covered. And we went into detail in Safinat al-Najah when it comes to that. And inshallah, in the coming durus, we're going to talk a little bit about it also. So these are conditions before Salah. After that, you have to know that the time of Salah has entered. You have to know that the time of Salah has entered. If you don't know about the time of Salah entering, and you just go and pray without checking, without looking, your prayer is invalid even if you pray in time. So you have to have knowledge of the time of Salah entering. Okay? If you're not able to know about the time of Salah, you can't check for yourself. Okay? You don't have any means to check, then you can depend on the knowledge of someone else about the time of Salah, but you have to check before the time of Salah enters. For example, if you know that by reading a juz of Quran from Maghrib to Isha, or a few juz, the time of Isha definitely would have entered, that's it. That's knowledge for you. Yeah? But you have to have something that tells you. You can't just guess and just pray without knowing what you're doing. After that, he says, istiqbal al-qibla, facing the qibla. Facing the qibla. And you should have some type of knowledge about the qibla before you start praying also. So if you don't have a compass that works, don't have anything that works, no knowledge about the qibla, you need to ask around, check, have some sort of knowledge, but you can't just go and guess and start praying. A lot of Muslims, they just I don't know. I've seen people they came to my house and they just start praying, and the qibla's not that way. I don't know why they started praying that way. They didn't check their phone. Yeah, could ask me, for example. Yeah, but they just go and pray. That's not significant. That doesn't count. You have to have knowledge of what you're doing, and the details of that, inshallah, we'll mention later on. But you have to know about these things before you do them, and then once you've done all of that, of course, when you face the qibla in the Shafi'i madhab, we mentioned in the Safinat al-Najah that it's best to face the qibla with your chest, to face the qibla directly, not just generally, but directly. So alhamdulillah, in this building, for example, qibla is actually that way, exactly that way. But in some places, the qibla you need to move a little bit left and right. In the Shafi'i madhab, you should face the exact qibla, if you can. There's another opinion inside the Shafi'i madhab, and it's the opinion of the other madhabs that say that you have to be in the general direction, but you don't have to exactly face the qibla. So you can face the angle of the qibla. That's the opinion of Imam Ahmad, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, and also the second opinion in the Shafi'i madhab. So when we need to, we can take this opinion when it's hard to get the exact qibla, but it's best if you're praying outside the masjid to try to get the exact qibla. It's best. Especially when the qibla is straightforward, then it's simple, alhamdulillah. There's two places where you can not face the qibla. What are these states? When you're praying in extreme fear. What's extreme fear? The fear prayer, Salat al-Khawf, is going to come inshallah in the book of Salah, okay? There's different stages of fear prayer. Extreme fear, for example, when you're fighting with your sword, okay? And you're on the horse and you're praying at the same time. Reciting Fatiha with intention and everything. Just, you're not facing the qibla and you're also moving around Allah, yeah? This is extreme fear. You don't need to face the qibla in that state. Okay? What if all of the soldiers just disappeared all of a sudden? A miracle happened, or they just ran away. Then, khalas, face the qibla and continue your prayer properly. If you're in the second rak'ah, for example, we'll go into the detail, inshallah ta'ala. But if you're in extreme fear, you don't need to face the qibla. But in general fear prayer, where the imam is praying in one row and the other people are behind him and they're standing and he's down and stuff, you have to face the qibla as well. Okay? And the second state you don't have to face the qibla in is when you are traveling. Not when you're in the car, when you're traveling. In the car inside the city, it's not permissible. On a horse inside the city, it's not permissible. On a camel inside the city, it's not permissible. You have to be traveling. You have to be outside the city. Even a short travel, less than the 80 to 130, less than that is okay. But it has to be considered a travel outside the city. So when you're traveling and you are on, you're sitting on something, you're sitting on something that carries you. So you can't stand up basically. It's hard. In that case, you can pray towards the direction that you are traveling to. But if you are able to, you start your salah towards the qibla. So if you're on a horse, for example, you move towards the qibla, you make takbir that way, and then you let it go and you travel in that way. And there's a lot of detail when it comes to that we're going to take inshallah in coming lessons, so we're not going to rush. But these are the general conditions that you have to have before starting salah, and inshallah we'll go into details of these things and other conditions and other details of salah in the coming durus, inshallah ta'ala.
Is that non-obligatory prayers only?
Yes, only in sunnah prayers, not in compulsory prayers. Compulsory prayers have to be done on the ground, or something that's stable. It can be moving, but it has to be stable, and also towards the qibla. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Did you take photo of the attendance?
Yeah.
There's 17 now.
There were 20.